What's happening, everybody? Justin, Bridgewater's finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at NerdTees, and welcome back to another week of irresponsible picks from a 10-year-old who likes the Sonic movies. My comment section has just been a cavalcade over the last few days. Welcome to week 5 of my weekly CFL football pick show for the 2022 CFL regular season, and oh no, we finally took the downturn that everyone's been waiting for. Went 7-5 last week. It was perfectly fine. If you bet everything that I gave you last week, you made a little bit of money. It wasn't the 10-2s that we had the previous weeks. I don't tell you to bet the things that I bet. I don't tell you to agree with the picks that I make, but we still went 7-5. So I'm not going to feel too terrible about the results from last week. That included going 2-2 straight up, also 2-2 on the totals. It's officially a particular season that we're going to talk about here in a bit, and still went 3-1 against the spread. So look, 75% against the spread, I'll take that pretty well any week. Now 14-2 straight up, 13-3 against the spread, and still 10-6 on the totals on the year. Good for 37-11 overall, still 77.1%, still white hot around this place, and we are going to turn things around from our 7-5 week last week here in week 5, where we only have 3 games this week. Apologies if the lighting is a little crazy. It is very dark and overcast and pouring down rain outside, so the natural light option, not really an option for us this week. CFL Fantasy in week 4, had a massive week. A week where I gained on basically the entirety of the field across CFL Fantasy, at the very least in the official Atlantic Schooners CFL Fantasy Football League. 115.8 points. It's among the best weeks I've ever had, and might be the best week I've ever had. My MVP, it was tough to pick one. I had to go with Lions receiver Keon Hatcher, 166 receiving yards on 7 catches with a touchdown from Nathan Rourke. That was good for 29.6 fantasy points, but I had 3 people in my roster who had at least 20. You had Hatcher, you had Kyan Schaefer-Baker, and you had Jamal Morrow, all of them topping 20 points last week, now sitting at 348.1 in terms of my fantasy points on the season. And that is good to rifle us up 9 spots in the official Atlantic Schooners Fantasy Football League, up to 12th place now out of 47. The leader has 426.3. So while I still trail first place by over 78 points, I gained on first place by 3 full points this week, which feels pretty darn good. I trailed 10th place now only by 3.3 points. So I sit in 12th. I only trail 10th by 3 points. I gained 33 points on the team in 10th place and overtook the team in 20th place, gained on them by 47.8, and now lead 10th place by over 39 points. Lead 20th place, sorry, by over 39 points. So it was a massive fantasy football week for us in week 4. That'll lead us into our CFL fantasy football lineup for week 5, which is right in front of your eyes right now, and we are going to put our trust into Bo Levi Mitchell and Kadeem Carey for the Calgary Stampeders to propel us in fantasy this week. And look, a lot of the lineup looks the same as it looked last week, because why mess with something that's working? We're running back Jamal Morrow. We're running back Kyan Schaefer-Baker. We're running back Keon Hatcher. I mean, they all had fantastic weeks last week. They're all significant linchpins of their particular offenses, so we're running them all back this week. Now, that does leave me with a choice to make. Do I run a defense or do I run somebody in the flex? And I grabbed Dalton Schoen from the Winnipeg Blue Bombers because, look, he's definitely filling in a big way in that offense. And at $2,500, I only really need, 7 points from him to really hit full value. And that's, again, shout out to my guy, Ryan Coop. Dalton Schoen was a slam dunk choice for me this week. I briefly considered Terry Williams for the Red Blacks because he serves a returning role and had a really good week last week in terms of his return yardage numbers, but I thought Dalton Schoen was a safer bet, so we grabbed him in the flex. There's our roster for week 5. Speaking of week 5, your 3-game slate looks like this, and a lot of books do not have numbers on the games up to this point. So I grabbed my lines from Sports Interaction. You can go to Sports Interaction now and see the lines I'm sure that I am using. They may change slightly. Calgary is in Edmonton taking on the Elks. We've got Ottawa traveling to Saskatchewan to take on the Roughriders. And Winnipeg is in BC to take on the BC Lions in what is clearly the marquee matchup of this early CFL season. By the way, I just snuck a sip of my tea. I can't wait to talk about it in the Nerd Tees plug, which will be coming after this game. We're going to start in Edmonton, that Stampeders-Elks matchup. Calgary coming into this game off of the bye from last week. They sit at 3-0 to start the season. They have had a pretty good start to the season, but it's been a tense 3-0. These have been some down-to-the-wire football games. That was no different 2 weeks ago where they played against Edmonton. The game was in Calgary. They only beat Edmonton by a score of 30-23. They trailed for most of that game, in fact, but they really took the game over in the fourth quarter. I don't think they can do that consistently across a whole season and continue to find the same kind of success. It's been tense, but they're 3-0, and they're 3-0 for a reason. I'm going to make a definitive statement, which I don't do a lot, but we're going to do it right now. Kadeem Carey is the best running back in the CFL when he's healthy. Because in that game 2 weeks ago, he was limited. He was limited injury-wise coming into that game. He still touched the ball 21 times, put up 102 all-purpose yards, and scored a rushing touchdown. He is an absolute weapon, and it just fills my heart to see Calgary finally using him as such. Because early on last season, I was on them every week. Why is Kadeem Carey not getting the ball? Kadeem needs to get the ball more. And when they finally did start feeding Kadeem, wouldn't you know who won the pony? They found incredible success with him. So I'm really looking for, I love seeing obviously where he's already developed to. I can't wait to see where he goes from here. Bo was surgical in that game 2 weeks ago, 75% passing, put up 321 yards through the air, had a passing touchdown. Malik Henry had his coming out party at receiver, 6 catches, $173. Just his third CFL touchdown and the first time he's gone over 100 yards in a CFL game. You never can tell who it's going to be for the Stamps, but it seems like it's always somebody, and 2 weeks ago it was Malik Henry. For the Edmonton Elks, they put one in the win column for the first time this season, coming up with a 29-25 win in Hamilton against the Ticats. Big win that moves their record to 1-3 on the year. And look, everything was going against Edmonton coming into that game. James Wilder was injured at the time. He's since moved to the 6-game injured list. I don't think we're going to see him all that much for maybe even for the rest of the year. But man, you got to think about, I wonder if they're regretting that Walter Fletcher trade now. Anyway, James Wilder goes to the 6th game. They're starting a rookie quarterback, Trey Ford. A lot of things going against him in that game, against a team that's supposed to be good. And of course they win the game. It only makes sense that they win the game. And why did they win the game? It was the defensive performance that I've been waiting for and calling for from the Edmonton Elks all year long. They only gave up 302 yards of total offense to Hamilton in that game. They forced 4 turnovers from the Ticats in that game. They won the game at the line of scrimmage. I think they only allowed Trey Ford to be sacked 1 time. They registered 3 sacks on their own, so they won the game at the line of scrimmage. They still took too many penalties, especially on the defensive side. So they got to clean that up. But look, this is not a team that's used to winning. So I'm gonna forgive that this time around. But it can't continue. But I'm gonna forgive it this time around because look, man, they got the job done. And that was Trey Ford. His CFL debut. He wasn't impressive throwing the ball. Completed less than 60% of his passes. Only had 159 yards passing. Threw his first CFL touchdown. Also threw his first CFL interception, which was not great. But he led the Elks with 61 yards on 6 carries on the ground. And that's the kind of thing that they need. They need a do-it-all quarterback back there. I don't know whether he still gets the start. He might start this game. They might go back to Nick Arbuckle. Although, after they win, how in the world can you go back to Nick Arbuckle? Although, shout out to Nick Arbuckle after that game, going over to the Ticats sideline and consoling Dane Evans, who was falling apart at the seams that they let this game get away from them like they've done every other game this season. But shout out to Nick Arbuckle. That's a good dude right there. It's difficult for me to envision a repeat performance for the Elks, if I'm going to be perfectly honest. I think on either side of the football, the offense might stick with it if they stick with Trey Ford, but I just don't see a repeat performance here. Calgary's going to be without Richie Sindani at wide receiver, but again, Bo spreads the ball so much, I still expect him to slice and dice this secondary that's really kind of average. They don't give up a ton of yardage, but they're giving up the second most per reception in the CFL so far this year. So I think this is only an average secondary. I think Kadeem Carey goes off as well. We got to be on Calgary in this one. Let's take the Stampeders on the road in Edmonton to beat the Elks. On the line, the Elks are taking 3.5 points here as a home underdog. I think you got to lay the points on Calgary in this game. It's not a lot of points to lay, and the Elks are only 2-6 against the spread at home dating back to last year. So they're not a team that's covering against the spread at home very much. They're 0-1 this season. It's not a ton of points to lay on what's clearly the better football team top to bottom. So we're going to lay the points on Calgary minus 3.5. Total in the game set at 50.5 points. I'm going to go over on this one. It's not a 40, but this is where the league is right now. And I talked about it a little bit. What season is it? It's hashtag over season. The points are flying in the CFL right now. And this is what I was talking about last year when I talked about, like, oh my God, the CFL is a high scoring league. And then it has one of the lowest scoring seasons, I think, in league history, dealing with COVID and everything like that. We're back to scoring points in the CFL. We're back to having some fun on offense in the CFL. Yes, it's a 50, but this is where the league is going. I'm taking the over in this one. We're going to go over 50.5 points in Calgary, Edmonton. We're going to go Stamps 34, Elks 20. I think Calgary wins this game pretty handily. I don't think it's the close game that it was 2 weeks ago. Calgary gets a big win over Edmonton. And before we move forward to the other two games this week, I'm going to take the opportunity, as I always do, to shout out my great friends and sponsors at Nerd Tees. Ladies and gentlemen, nerdtees.ca is where you need to go if you want to find dozens and dozens of incredible loose leaf tea blends and accessories for anybody in your family, anybody that you're looking to buy a gift for. Nerdtees.ca has got a great option, and they've got you covered. You're going to want to use my promo code BWFinest. That is going to get you 15% off at checkout. You're also going to get free shipping in Canada on any order over $100, which is excellent value right now. If you're one of my American viewers, and I know there are many of you, you also get a great conversion rate right now on the US dollar, so you're going to be saving yourself some money off the sticker price there as well. Today's blend is fantastic. It is a golden apple cinnamon, and the second once again, like I talked about last week with the watermelon, the second you open the bag, it just and it's this incredible scent. I snuck a sip of it a little bit earlier. It is delicious, and you are going to find nothing but deliciousness on nerdtees.ca. Promo code BWFinest, save your 15%, get your free shipping, find yourself something to love, or find someone you love something to love. You can do it on nerdtees.ca. See, that's why I like the Sonic movies. I'm a nerd. Let's go to Saskatchewan now. Roughriders are going to play host to the Ottawa REDBLACKS. Ottawa coming into this game 0-3 on the season, obviously losers of 3 straight, dropping a 3-point decision at home against BC last week. And again, this was a game that this was not a popular pick. I took Ottawa to upset BC in this game, and boy, it came awfully close. Ottawa was right there, right down to the wire at the end of this game. And again, their winless record belies just how competitive they've been with the competition they've had to play against so far this year. Winnipeg twice, and then now BC, who's the hottest team in the league. So yes, they're 0-3, but they've been competitive in all of these games. I do have to admit, it was the defensive splash plays in this game that really kept the offense with the ability to keep pace. And I figured it was going to be a high-scoring game, and that was what it was going to take. And that was exactly what Ottawa wound up doing. 2 interceptions and a fumble recovery. Nathan Rourke didn't have the greatest game. I mean, it was still a good game. Don't get me wrong, it was still a good game. But Ottawa had those defensive splash plays that kept them competitive in this game, and covering up for the fact that the defense did give up more than 500 total yards against them. We're at a point now with Ottawa where eventually this pass offense is going to have to start winning some games. Masoli's throwing the lights out from a yardage perspective. He's near 300 yards a game. He's playing very well. He's got 1 touchdown pass. Eventually, you got to put the ball in the end zone. The pass offense in this league has got to win football games. 300 yards is nice. Touchdowns are way better. For Saskatchewan, they avenged that bad loss against Montreal 2 weeks ago with a 41-20 drubbing in Regina to move their record to 3-1 on the season. Huge statement bounce back win, as your boy expected. And again, it was a massive return to form for the Riders on defense. 5 turnovers forced against the Alouettes, 6 quarterback sacks, Nick Marshall taking a 90-yard pick six back to the house. One wonders that if it was on that play that he injured his knee, he's been either limited or not participating at all in practice. So the Riders are definitely banged up. They were banged up going into the game last week. They're going to be banged up coming into the game this week, and that includes Cody Fajardo, who's wearing a knee brace, I think, but he's insisting that he's going to play. Jamal Morrow is the key to this offense. He might be the most valuable player in the CFL, at least on the offensive side of the ball. He might be at least one of the most valuable players in the CFL. All due respect to Nathan Rourke, who's kind of doing something special so far. He's a Swiss Army knife, man. 223 all-purpose yards for Jamal Morrow in that game last week, as well as a rush touchdown. He does it running the ball, receiving the ball. He does it in the return game. He does everything. Like I mentioned, Cody Fajardo nursing a knee injury. He insists that he's playing. That does have me a little uneasy coming into this one. And that's the respect that I really have for this Red Blacks team. I could envision a situation where if Cody Fajardo is limited or he leaves this game early, I can totally envision a situation in this game where Ottawa wins this game outright. I don't think that's going to happen. The Riders' defense has been nuclear at home this year. I'm going to go ahead and take Saskatchewan here because the game's in Saskatchewan. I really may have deferred to Ottawa in this game straight up if the game was in Ottawa. It's not. We're going to go with Saskatchewan here. Let's take the Riders to beat the Red Blacks. However, on the line, the Riders are laying a full touchdown here. It was 7.5. It's currently down, I should say, to 7 on Sports Interaction. This might not be a popular hedge, but this does not feel like a full touchdown game to me. Ottawa has been too competitive with top competition in the CFL so far this year. I can't lay 7 points. Don't know if I would lay 7 points against anybody with Ottawa right now because they're just keeping so competitive in these games. So just feels too hefty. I'm going to take the full 7 points with Ottawa here because, again, there's a very narrow path, but there is a path to Ottawa winning the game outright. So let's hedge and take the points. Total in the game set at 45. This is the smallest total of the week. The score doesn't even have to fly to get over 45, so we're going to go over 45 on this one for sure. In Saskatchewan and Ottawa, we're going to go Sasky 27, Ottawa 21. Over on the point total, Sasky wins outright, but I'm taking the Red Blacks with the points. And the last game we're going to look at is that marquee matchup, the marquee matchup so far of the 2022 CFL season, that being the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at 4-0, visiting the BC Lions at 3-0. Neither one of these teams have been touchable this year, which is pretty massive. Winnipeg on the tail end of back-to-back road games, having played on the road last week in Toronto and escaping with a 23-22 win. That was an escape. And they're kind of back to how I felt about them through the first 2 games. Like, is this the Winnipeg Blue Bombers? I certainly felt good after game number 3, but after game number 4, I'm kind of back to where I was at with the first 2 games. I'm not sure this is the full Winnipeg Blue Bombers experience, if that makes any sense. The Bombers were staked to a 17-0 lead in this game, led 17-3 at the half, and they kind of pulled a Hamilton in the second half of this game. They were outscored 19-6 in the second half of this game. Not very Winnipeg Blue Bombers-like. And they generated just 275 yards of total offense in that game. Usually not going to be good enough to win a game. They had to have Toronto miss an extra point in the dying seconds to win this game and have this game not go to overtime. If it goes to overtime, literally anything can happen. Winnipeg could very easily have lost this game. I don't necessarily feel like they played well enough to win it. They just won it. I'll even go a step further with that. Without the defensive splash plays, like we just talked about with Ottawa, without the defensive splash plays, and those being they forced 4 turnovers in this game, they had 3 quarterback sacks, and the sacks were honestly very, very timely. It was on like second down and short from midfield. Boom, all of a sudden there's a sack. They go back 6 yards. They have to punt. Like the timely things that impact possession. That's what, I mean, Winnipeg's built careers off of that in the last couple of seasons. Without those splash plays, and they also knocked down 5 passes in the secondary, this game's probably not even close. I think Toronto wins that game handily without those defensive splash plays. The BC Lions, for their part, come into this game off of that 34-31 win in Ottawa last week. Nathan Rourke showed that he was human. He threw 2 interceptions. He lost a fumble, which felt like a very critical part of the game. And everybody's talking about, well, yeah, but after he threw the second interception, he was 10 for 11 with this many yards and threw this touchdown and all this, and he was almost perfect. After he threw that second interception, he also lost that fumble. So he was human in this game. And I'm becoming a very big fan, like a lot of people are in this league, of Nathan Rourke. But he was very human in that football game, but he also proved his mental toughness. He definitely proved that when the chips are down, he is able to dig down deeper into himself, find a second gear. He absolutely did that in this game. But it was all hands on deck for the BC Lions in that one. They had 5 receivers that were targeted at least 3 times in the pass game. They had 4 that had at least 3 catches and 40 yards receiving. So the ball was all over the place in this game. James Butler was massive, 129 all-purpose yards, had a rush touchdown and a receiving touchdown. He was massive in that football game. We're kind of also back to last season's hyperactive secondary with the BC Lions. I talked about it quite a bit last year, where their secondary is flying all over the field, knocking down passes, interceptions. We're kind of back to that. 6 pass knockdowns in that game last week against Ottawa and Jeremiah Masoli. Now, the team did take 10 penalties for 121 penalty yards. Not going to cut it against top competition. This is a top competition type of game. If they get into penalty trouble, Winnipeg can and potentially will take over this football game. So that is me speaking directly to anyone from the BC Lions who may happen to be watching this video. If you start getting into penalty trouble, it's going to be a long night. Even last year's Bombers, clearly a better team than this year's Bombers. Even last year's Bombers weren't undefeated. They lost a few games along the way. They lost a game early in the season last year, if memory serves me correctly. I think weren't they 2-1? I think I'm leaning the home side either way in this matchup. If this game was in Winnipeg, I think I'd be leaning on Winnipeg. The game's in BC, I'm going to lean on the BC Lions. I think this is their statement game of this season, one way or the other. Let's take the BC Lions at home to get the win over the 2-time defending Grey Cup champs. On the line, the Lions are actually laying 3 points in this game, which is a lot of points to lay against the reputation of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Neither one of these teams are all that great in this situation dating back to last season. So you'd put the Lions at home and put the Bombers on the road. Both of these teams are under 500 against the spread in this situation. They're 4-5 dating back to last year. That being said, it's a small price to pay. It's about the highest end of my small price to pay range, which is a full field goal, but they're not going to ask us, at least not yet, to buy the extra half point. I'm going to lay the points on BC in this one, I think. It's very close. I really wanted to take the points here. My visceral reaction to seeing the line was, I'm taking those points. And then I thought about it a little bit more, and I was like, oh boy, it's really not that much. Total in the game set at 48. I got to go over on it again. It's the exact same situation as the last game. The score doesn't even have to fly to beat 48. 50 points beats 48. And there's a lot of points being scored in the CFL right now. So I'm over on all 3 games. I got to go over 48 in BC Winnipeg. Let's go Lions 27, Bombers 23. Lions win, Lions cover, over. There you go, folks. Those are the picks for the abbreviated slate of games here in Week 5 in the CFL in 2022. We'll go over them here with you one more time. I've got the Calgary Stampeders going to Edmonton and beating the Elks by a score of 34-20, which means I'm laying the 3.5 points on Calgary in a game that goes over 50.5 points. I've got the Saskatchewan Roughriders at home getting the win over the Ottawa REDBLACKS. I'm taking the 7 points on Ottawa. I got this game finishing 27-21 Saskatchewan. So taking the 7 points on Ottawa in a game that goes over 45. And I got the BC Lions in BC getting the win over the Winnipeg Blue Bombers 27-23. I'm laying the 3 points with the hometown Lions in a game that goes over 48. That's the show for you folks here in week 5. Thank you so much for watching, interacting, participating. Just yesterday, we uploaded part 1 of the 2022 Justin and Tyler Mid-Year Movie Awards. So I'd love it if you would check that out as well. We're going to be uploading part 2 towards the end of this week or the beginning of next. That'll be the next video you see on the channel. You won't see the week 6 episode here until you get that one. So look, I would appreciate it. I'd love it if you would take the time to pop on over and check that out. Love doing movie awards with Tyler. It's a ton of fun, and now we're deciding to do some mid-years as well. But as always, thank you so much for your support in this this burgeoning little CFL community that we are building here. That's it for me, Justin, Bridgewater's Finest on YouTube, Blockbuster_guy on Twitter, fueled as always by the incredible folks at NerdTees. They're right here. Week 5 now in the books. We'll see you again for week 6, and remember, just because I pick it doesn't mean you have to as well. We'll see you in week 6.